Good morning. Welcome to the November 15th Suffolk Board of Zoning Appeals hearing. Mr. Skinner, will you please call the order?
Dominique Epps.
Here.
Richard Eslick.
Here.
Daniel Froman. Corey Conagay.
Here.
Melissa Venable.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Are there any corrections to the previous BZA minutes? May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Just vocally, by yay or nay, do we approve or accept the minutes from last month's hearing?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The minutes are approved. Our first agenda item this morning is BZA 2022-00031. Mr. Skinner, will you please read the caption?
Before the Board of Zoning Appeals today is BZA 31-2022. The applicant, as Wayne Young, is requesting a variance to reduce the required yard setback from 15 feet to 10 feet to construct a single-family dwelling. The property is identified as tax map 4*17B, located on Morris Point Road. Zoning classification, residential, low, medium, low density. When you act upon this request, we'll be acting on a request to reduce the required setback from 15 feet to 10 feet to construct a single-family dwelling. Should the board decide in favor of approving this request, the 8 findings as listed in your package must be articulated as part of your motion. We will now have staff report. By Kevin Alexander, zoning inspector.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members, and good morning, community at large. As previously stated, the applicant, Wayne Young, is requesting a variance from the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO Article 4, Section 31407C, Table 417-1 Dimensional Standards L, to reduce the minimum required side setbacks from 15 feet to 10 feet in order to construct a single-family dwelling. The property is identified as tax map and parcel 4*17B, located at 1828 Morris Point Road, Suffolk, Virginia, Chuckatuck Voting Borough, zoning classification RL, residential low. This variance request was advertised in the Suffolk News Herald, and a notice was mailed to adjacent property owners in accordance with Section 15.2-2204 of the Code of Virginia. The public notice sign was posted on the property pursuant to the request of the zoning administrator. The applicant stated in his application he's seeking a reduction of the RL zoning district side setbacks from 15 feet to 10 feet in order to construct a new single-family dwelling. The lot is located within the city's infill development area, required that any newly constructed home be a minimum of 20 feet wide and comply with all city standards and requirements. The dimensional requirements for newly created lots in the RL zoning district requires lots to have a total land area of 30,000 square feet with a minimum street frontage of 80 feet and minimum side setbacks of 15 feet and lot width of 100 feet measured at the front setback line. This lot appears to be non-conforming with dimensions of 240 feet in length and 40 feet in lot width, as illustrated with the attached site sketch. I apologize, board. As illustrated with the attached site sketch provided by the applicant. Upon further research of the deeded lot, it contains a 40-foot driveway easement agreement totaling 800 square feet at the northwest corner of the property between Mr. Dwayne Young and the property owners at 1641 Egret Circle, located in the city of Suffolk. Therefore, any proposed structure or development in this lot will have to account for the present easement. Furthermore, the deeded lot in dimensions different from the applicant's provided sketch, with 140 foot and 47 inches in length at the left interior property line and 190 feet at the right interior property line, which can be seen with the attached exhibit map that was recorded in the City of Suffolk Clerk's office on April 16, 2016. Based on the sole provided sketch and request to provide further supporting documents such as surveys, structural plans, and elevations, there is not enough pertinent information to support this variance request at this time. Lastly, this item came before the board on September 8, 2015, in which it was tabled for 90 days, then ultimately withdrawn by the applicant. I'm open for any questions pertaining to this this variance by the applicant if need be.
I do have a quick question, if you don't mind. 2015, I recall that this application was heard. You said it was tabled and then
Yes, it was tabled for 90 days, then ultimately it was withdrawn because they had to situate the things with the easement on the property. But it was
never voted upon?
from the records I researched, it was never voted upon.
Interesting, okay.
But I'm open for any other further questions the board may have in reference to this.
Thank you, sir. Board, is there any other questions before we begin the public hearing? We will now open the public hearing. Hearings are 30 minutes in length, 10 minutes for proponents, 15 minutes for opposition, and 5 minutes for rebuttal. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Please come to the podium. Sir, if you would please state your name and address.
Wayne Young, address is 501 Claxton Creek Road in Seaford, Virginia. This amendment was held back because it wasn't held back. It was just tabled because I was given some items to do in reference to some of the individuals that were complaining about what they needed to have done to their property, and it was just one individual, and that was done within past 90 days, so I couldn't really amend it. But Mr. Jackson I gave Mr. Jackson an easement of 40 feet to fence his yard in, and that was agreed upon and modified and accepted by me and the homeowner. Since then, nothing else has been done. I mean, I don't know what to do after that. I just know that I'm still available to build the property, to build a piece of land on the home on the property. So, is there any other than that? Is there any other items that I need to procure? Or
At this point, this is time for you to give your appeal to the application. We'll have the public hearing, and then we can come back and ask questions when the public hearing is closed.
okay. So what does the appeal represent? I mean, I'm appealing right now that it be processed. Is that what Is that what you're talking about?
It's your opportunity to tell us why you'd like the application to move forward, and then we can ask questions once the hearing is closed.
Why I wanted to move forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, for one, I'm a contractor. That's what I do. I build houses, and I've had this land since 2004. And I bought it from my uncle, and I've been able to do nothing with it. When the land was developed, my uncle lived on this property since '54, and it was more property than it is right now. But for some reason, when the developer came in there, they squeezed his property up with Dominion Power, taking 15 feet of his property of one side, and not giving him an easement on any other direction. So here I am with an uncle's property that I'm paying taxes on every year, that I can't do anything with. And that's a hardship for me. So with that said, I don't know what else to say or do. I'm just requesting a hardship situation to be able to build on my family's property.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone to speak in opposition of this application? If you'd come up one at a time, please. Please state your name and address.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, and staff. My name is Fred Brousseau. I reside at 601 Shenandoah Street, Portsmouth, Virginia. I am here this morning to support my daughter and son-in-law, Caroline and Nick Bell, who are the property owners of 1644 Moores Point Road, immediately to the north of the subject property. They have asked me to speak because I've had some experience with zoning ordinances and regulations. They are opposed to the requested variance for the following reasons. This request is a self-imposed hardship. A cursory review of the deeds and records yesterday showed that this property was created in 1936 as a 40-foot wide lot. It was also shown on a deed in 1949 as a 40-foot lot as a result of a bankruptcy sale. It was then also shown on 1985 as a 40-foot lot on the original plat that showed the adjoining properties that were to be platted into the subdivision. This is knowledge that the owner had of the width of the lot when it was first purchased in 2004 by himself, and then transferred to another LLC that he had in 2022. As was stated, a similar request was heard in 2015-16, and we believe that there was an actual vote to deny the request at that hearing based on discussions with residents and neighbors who were at that hearing. Some of them, I believe, are present today. As such, once a denial has been made, then the applicant has 30 days, or any other person aggrieved by the vote, to note an appeal. Once that 30-day period has passed, then that appeal becomes final and binding in perpetuity. We have always related it to be dead. The state regulations nor the federal or local regulations have a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year date. The only thing that comes into play here is when there is a material change to the property, or there's a material change to the state law, the enabling legislation, or to the local regulations. The other thing that I have before us is there has been one material change, and the applicant did just mention that there was a easement granted, and that was the only material change from the previous case to now, which actually reduced the amount of land that could be built on, not the land of the lot, but through that easement, it reduced the land that could be built on. The reduction is again, was 800 feet more or less. The lot has had roughly about 7,500 square feet. It's now down to roughly 6,600 square feet of lot area that could be built on. The proposed development is not shown completely, i.e. there are no dimensions or numbers provided to show what the lot coverage, landscaping requirements to be complied with, or the location of the HVAC equipment, which, based on what is being shown usually on the side of the house, which would further encroach into the side yard setbacks. The ordinance does allow for it to be 3 feet, but since you're already asking for 5 feet, then there's nothing being shown what would be done with that HVAC. There is a document that talks about the soil conditions for a septic system, but there has been no review or approval for the necessary septic system by the Suffolk Health Department. The request is also not in keeping with the existing developed neighborhood or with the UDO's stated development ideals for the RL zoning district. Not finally, but next, this may be a precedent for future high-density rezonings requests for the farmland immediately to the west and south of the development. This could cause a reduction of property value in the surrounding area. And finally, the owner, and I can say for myself since 2017 when my daughter and son-in-law purchased the adjoining property, has completely failed to maintain the property. He has stored construction equipment and material, tires, shingles, and has allowed the grass to grow in excess of a 4-foot height. So it has not been maintained whatsoever. For all of these reasons, we are asking that this request be denied. Are there any questions?
We'll ask questions at the end of the public hearing. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Morning, members of the board. My name is Al Will of 1640 Egret Circle, and I am the Vice President of the Sleepy Lake Homeowners Association, which encompasses that area. The property, which is listed as tax map 417B, is adjacent to 4 properties that are part of the Sleepy Lake development. A summary of these properties, again, they're touching this particular property that's requesting a variance. 1644 Moores Point Road is a 2,750 square foot home. 1648 Moores Point Road is a 2,640 square foot home. 1637 Egret Circle is a 2,860 square foot home. And 1641 Egret Circle is a 4,100 square foot home. All of these properties are built on lots that are 6/10 of an acre or greater. The pattern of square footage that I've mentioned here for both the lots and the homes is about the average for our houses in Sleepy Lake. The property being considered here, and I'm looking at the tax map for this figure, is 1/4 of an acre and will not accommodate a house compatible with the other houses in the Sleepy Lake development. Therefore, the Sleepy Lake Homeowners Association urges the proposed variance be denied. Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in opposition of this application?
Morning, board. My name is Terrence Jackson. I reside at 1641 Egret Circle. Mr. Young, he actually built my home. The property that he's referring to and the easement, the 40-foot easement that he's referring to, it came about after the last hearing because the actual driveway that he built, it encroaches on that particular parcel. That was not known to myself or my wife until after the fact because the entire area was cleared. So we presume, based upon the information that we had, that we owned the entire parcel until we found out that he was attempting to build a new home. At that point, if you look at the drawings, you will see that the driveway, there's a
Thank you, sir.
I think the shaded area is, it depicts where my actual driveway is. And so that, at that point, easement was created because the parcel encroaches on the driveway to my existing home. Over the years, there's been some discussion regarding purchasing of some of that area to to kind of square it off, but it kind of went and came, never proceeded. My recollection of the last appeal is that we voted, but apparently there's no record that occurred. I oppose the construction. It's not in sync with the community at large. And again, the landscape has not been maintained over the years. So I concur with my neighbors, and I do have some letters for the board from some of my adjacent neighbors that were not able to attend the appeal hearing this morning.
Yeah, please, if we could get those letters. There's also, for the record, a letter in our package that states that one of the adjoining property owners is not in favor of the application. Mr. Jackson, do you have anything else to add?
Ma'am, do you guys have any questions for myself?
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition of this application? Mr. Young, would you like to come back, or would anyone else like to speak in favor or to rebut the, what we've heard thus far?
Is, hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to figure out how could I own a piece of land for over 20 years and not be able, and pay taxes on it, and not be able to use it functionally? Doesn't the city have some responsibility in making sure that my requests are recognized and moved upon? All I did is acquire the land. It seems like the organizations that affected the land with the easements and the Dominion Power easements and the 15-foot easements on the left side of the property. It seems like before the property was developed, that lot, that 40-foot lot, was impinged upon by easements that had a definite effect on my uncle. So I'm trying to figure out, where do we go from here? What do I do? Is the land just there, dead? Is it functional? I've been waiting for years and years. Even when I came here the first time and they told me to give this gentleman an easement, I gave him an easement so he can, so that I didn't have the ability to encroach. And he told me he was going to put a fence up. That didn't happen. Well, he's got the paperwork's done. It's down in the city. It's registered, and I don't know. Where do I go from here? I'm looking for some benefits, just like anybody else. Trying to get my property. Trying to activate it as a tax base for someone. Right now, it's just coming out of my pocket every year. And it's not being, and I am taking care of it. It's not my fault that somebody came out there and dumped a bunch of tires. I would never do that. Being a builder, I would know that that's not the right thing to do. But since it's my property, I'm responsible for it. So I'm trying to relieve myself of the issues that have haunted me since 2004. I'm asking for help. And one way to help is to give me 1 foot so that I could build a piece of property without breaking any laws, any laws that I know that I've broken. So I'm requesting that you guys allow this piece of property to be amended. Or I don't know what the word is that you need to come from me, but all I know is I want to be able to build on this piece of property. If there's any questions, please call me.
We will, sir. Thank you. We'll call you back to the podium, I'm sure. Thank you. This concludes our public hearing. I have several questions, if you don't mind. Mr. Alexander? It sounds like there's some conflicting information. Do you know when the property was last sold, purchased and sold? Or sold and
It was
purchased?
purchased in 2004.
Under the current ordinance?
I'm looking through the previous file, and I don't have that information as to when it was last sold. What I do have is the information as to when it was actually tabled in November of 2015, and then in December it was withdrawn. As far as the actual selling of the actual land, I don't have that in this current file.
Okay. Mr. Alexander, I recall, like Mr. Jackson did, I was here as well, and I remember it being deferred to try to resolve the issue with Mr. Jackson and create the easement. And then I remembered fairly clearly that it was voted upon and there was action that took place. So I don't know, Ms. Cobb, if you have additional information, but like Mr. Jackson, I have the same recollection. As a matter of fact, I remember I could not be present for that particular meeting and called some of the folks that were on the board to find out what the resolution was.
All we have is an old file from 2015. Says where it was formally withdrawn after the 90 days that was tabled. So we don't have anything showing where there was any action that was taken place.
Wow, that's,
We pulled it all from old Tidemark stuff.
Yeah.
In the old paper file.
oh gosh. Do you know, because there seems to be some conflicting information on the ownership of the property, how long it's been owned by Mr. Young?
I believe it might have changed into different LLCs that Mr. Young, or sorry, I said his name wrong, has owned. But I don't have the current information on that. He originally purchased a lot in 2004, and then I think has changed different LLCs during that time.
Okay,
But it still has belonged to him, just under different entities.
since 2004.
May 25th, 2004.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. They were my only questions at this time. Does anybody else have questions for Ms. Cobb or Mr. Alexander?
Only thing, I'm looking at it now, and it shows that he purchased it in May 25th, 2004, and it doesn't show, I guess he changed it from one LLC to the other LLC on March 17th, 2022. That's what I'm looking at it right here. Also, I don't see where Virginia Power or anybody else or any other entity has gained access or anything else to the side adjacent properties also. I just see it showing that the actual owners, 1648, his adjacent owners, they own their property themselves. It's not,
Right,
they don't-
we weren't provided with a survey to call out any of those
Okay.
features, so we have no idea.
All
at
right,
this point.
I'm just looking, is me looking up here, that's what I'm basically seeing.
Do we have other questions?
The acquisition in 2004, was that with a purchase price, or was it a gift deed? He said it was from his uncle.
That is something that Mr. Young would have to answer. I believe he purchased it. I believe there was a price. It was purchase price.
37,000. On May 25th, 2004, 37,000. He purchased that property.
Okay, so at that time, in 2004, the current ordinance that's in place today was in place then as well, with the same standards. So this, at that time, was an infill lot and would have had to have a special exception or a variance, I should say.
Right.
So I'm just trying to understand the history based on the information that we've been given. And again, I remember this being problematic in 2015 and several of the neighbors being upset at that time as well. So it was never a by right, you could go ahead and build on it. I think if it was purchased under the old ordinance, it would cause me more concern, I believe, but since it's under the current ordinance as it is today, at that time, in 2004, still would have required a variance. And my biggest concern here is in the 8 findings, we have to make sure that this does not cause a detriment to the adjacent neighbors, and we've heard from all the adjacent neighbors, and there's quite a bit of concern. And it's not of my opinion to say this would be detrimental or not, but it is because it's not adjacent to my house, but it is adjacent to theirs. So that's one of the 8 findings, is one of the things we certainly have to consider. Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have additional questions?
Yeah, I don't have any questions for you all. Something from Mr. Young and I believe Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Young or Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, Mr. Jackson. You stated that Mr. Young, he constructed your property,
Yes, sir.
all right? How would you say is the condition of your property? Are you pretty satisfied with this work?
There were some challenges during the process. There were some things that I was happy with, and then there were some things that I wasn't satisfied with either.
Okay. If that property was constructed, right, would you be satisfied or pretty pleased that property such as yours is being built in adjacent to your home?
No, sir. My home is 4,100 square feet. I'm not sure exactly what the square footage or the specs for this home would be, but
I can restate the question. Would you prefer a new construction house being built or 4 feet of grass, sir?
4 feet of grass.
You excited about 4 feet of grass?
No, sir. I'm not excited about.
But if
4
you had to
feet of grass.
choose, you would choose the 4 feet of grass instead of having a actual property constructed next to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I had.
I had a question for you. Which is your address? Are you 1648 or are you 1644?
1641.
1641. Okay.
So, sir, so for clarity purposes, when I originally bought this lot, there was an older gentleman that apparently lived at some point in a property on that parcel, but he because this was all heavily wooded at the time, he was a junk man. And so a lot of the debris kind of scattered throughout both into my parcel and the 2 adjoining parcels to this particular parcel that we're referring to. So during the process, I wasn't the first that I was made aware that that was his uncle was today. I was not aware of that because during this whole process, when he was building my home, he cleared out this entire area. And again, if the squared off part, the bigger loop is that's my parcel. If you took where his parcel goes into my parcel, just went straight across, he cleared that entire piece during my construction. So I wasn't aware that this was a separate piece of that until the variance and that he applied for in 2015.
Right. So looking at the letters that you provided,
Sure.
it seems that the neighbors are mentioning the grass being an eyesore and items that has been placed on the lot, correct? But it also sounds like that you all are asking for Mr. Young to maintain the lot, right? Keep the property maintained so it's not an eyesore. So I'm just finding it a little difficult how a new constructed property, weighing that against 4 feet of grass, how you would prefer to have 4 feet of high grass than a new constructed property. It's kind of hard for me to kind of understand that.
And I understand. And that being said, I do believe Mr. Young purchased this property because he encroached on this property when he built my home inadvertently.
Well, we can't,
Because it's clear he built my home and he built this driveway on land that was not mine, nor was it his at the time.
Gotcha.
That was, he did it, not me. He himself did that. And so he in turn purchased that parcel.
Gotcha.
That was after the fact.
How long have you lived there, sir?
I bought that parcel in 2004, and Mr. Young started the process. I either bought it in 2003 or 2004.
October the 24th, 2003?
That sounds about right. And Mr. Young built my home at that point.
All right, so I'm assuming, me just looking at everything, did Mr. Young, because it doesn't show where it left from one person over to Mr. Young to you. It just shows that
He was the builder. He
he
didn't
was
have
the
to.
builder. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so Mr. Young purchased the property at that time. So I'm assuming that both of these was common ownership.
Mr. Young never owned his property.
He never owned his property.
No, I purchased my property with a construction to perm loan.
Right, from Mr. Young.
No, sir. I purchased my property from, I do believe it was the owner owned several lots in the neighborhood.
Okay.
I purchased my property, and Mr. Young was the contractor that we chose to build.
Okay.
During the
I understand.
process, Mr. Young cleared the parcel, he built my home, and he built on land that I did not purchase. And he then had a relationship with this gentleman that I was not aware that he was family. At some point, there was a agreement for him to purchase that parcel, which he in fact did. But that is, he built, for clarity, he built on that parcel that I did not own. And he later bought that parcel.
So portion of your driveway is inside his actual
Yes,
parcel?
sir.
So that's where the easement agreement
Yeah.
came in at.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
I do want to state, and that's all I have for you, Mr. Jackson. Do y'all have any questions from this? Okay.
Sir.
I do want to state that we haven't been approving applications based on, to my knowledge, based on if a property is in sync with other properties. If this property, for instance, this application was downtown Suffolk, to my knowledge, there haven't been any issue if someone was looking to build a property, say on 5th Street, right? Regardless of the size of that property on that parcel. I don't see any reason to show any type of favoritism because of the area that this property is, and regardless to the fact that it's not in sync with the adjacent properties, right? I think it's a great idea for Mr. Young to even consider putting a new construction property on something that has been considered by his neighbors as an eyesore. I commend you, sir, for sticking with it and not just throwing in the towel. So that's all I wanted to state.
Do we have a motion for recommendation or a motion for denial of the application?
I make a motion to approve the application.
I second.
We have a motion on the table for approval. Is there a conversation in regard to the motion?
I find it hard to support this in the respect that there's no structural plans, no survey, no anything. So we would be voting to approve something that we have no idea what it would be. And the staff has recommended that they need additional information, and I'm not in a position to vote on anything that is an incomplete application. So I will not be supporting your motion.
Question, Mr. Skinner, if what Mr. Eslick is stating, is it possible to have a second motion, or do we need to vote on the first motion?
Unless the motion is amended, so by the person who's,
Mr. Epps?
right, Mr. Epps, if you wanted amended, and what we could do is amend it for the applicant to provide information on the setback elevations and what type of property that he's going to put at that particular location, which is something that we have done in the past. We've had people give us more information so that we can get a clear understanding of what's going there and how it will look. So what the motion could be to table it for 30 days so that the applicant can have some plans drawn up. Does not mean that we're going to approve the application, but it just means that based on the information that has been provided to this board, we don't have enough information to clearly state one way or the other.
So what we're looking at with this proposed 3-bedroom, even though we don't have the elevations, we do have this inside the application that shows a proposed 3-bedroom with a proposed garage on the back side. Is that correct?
The board feels that the board has enough information, then the board can choose to go with the motion that was originally stated.
I think there's also some concern in regard to the easement that was mentioned and where that falls on the property. As Mr. Young had mentioned the easement, and one of the other people from the audience had commented on an easement, and it's hard to tell. It certainly does not show on the
It shows up here in the northeast end.
As
Morning. My name is Melvian Knight. I'm the Assistant Zone Administrator for the City of Suffolk. Just to provide some clarity on infill lots as it relates to our nonconformity chapter, which is in Article 8, it states that a property must maintain an architectural features, conformity, and development patterns of the surrounding neighborhood and development or developed properties. So that is under that section 31-801, which talks about the reduction of the setback, where the zoning administrator is allowed to grant up to 30% reduction for a property, and underneath that criteria, they have to be able to produce a 20-foot wide structure and still meet the standards of the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you.
hence the reason for requesting additional information per the staff report. That makes quite a bit of sense. And I think you had mentioned or referenced other projects that we've approved with very similar specifications and standards, but we haven't had this type of opposition. So I hear what you're saying and actually agree with most of what you're saying, except that we haven't had the opposition from neighboring properties with the feel or concern of this being a detriment. So if you were inclined to to modify your motion, we certainly would entertain that. If not, we can move forward with the motion that's on the table.
Yeah, I prefer just move with the motion that's on the table.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion for approval by Mr. Epps and a second by Mr. Carnegie. Mr. Skinner, will you please call roll?
This is a motion for approval. Dominique Epps,
Yes.
Richard Eslick,
No.
Dan Froman, Corey Carnegie,
Yes.
Melissa Venable.
No.
Motion does not pass.
So unfortunately, the motion does not pass. I think I would have been inclined if we could have gotten additional information to make a different decision, but without having architectural standards to understand how it reflects the adjacent properties or works within the property. I absolutely agree with the infill policy of the city of Suffolk, but unfortunately, at this time, with the limited information, this has been denied.
There can be an additional motion that for additional information as it relates to, because we still have a split, a 2-2
Okay.
tie, so.
So I would like to move forward and make a motion to table this application for architectural standards, elevations and such, so we can understand what would be built on the property.
Sorry.
Is there a second for that? Sir, you can't approach the bench
I
at the
can't?
moment. No.
Oh, can you call me back?
We can call you up in just a second. Right now, we have a motion on the table to ask for additional information.
I
Is there a
second.
second to that?
I second.
We have a second to that motion.
Carnegie.
Mr. Carnegie. Is there a discussion? Would you like to ask Mr. Young to come up?
Sure. Mr. Young, you could come up. You could come up, Mr. Young. Do you already have your plans and everything already out? Like you're the design?
Moving because you're mad.
Oh,
But that's okay. Yeah, I have that particular house in the city's archives as a model.
All right,
I've built it before. It's in the city of Suffolk.
all right. Does your outside of your home that's in the archives, is it in the same dimensions or the same features as the current homes in the current neighborhood?
Yes. You talking about in Sleepy Lake?
Right, in the current homes that's in the neighborhood that you're trying to build in.
Not in Sleepy Lake, but there's
All right.
one right off of Monticello Avenue.
All right, so basically what we're asking is for you to come back to us. That's what, if I'm not mistaken, come back to us. We need something to go with that's designed on the outside that's with your neighboring neighbors.
Oh, the design is basically,
I'm talking about the outside,
Yes.
the vinyl, brick, or whatever
yeah,
you have.
It's a house two houses down from this house that's, I'd hate to say it's better looking, but it's more improved than the house on Moore's Point.
Okay, so we would ask that we're going to take a vote. We have a motion on the table, or motion that's been presented for 30 days so that you can provide additional information to Ms. Cobb, and then we will rehear the application.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Because we have members that already will not be.
We will table the application for an undetermined time at this moment to see if you can provide the additional information that's being requested, and then we'll advertise for the next BZA hearing that this will be held. But we were asking for the additional information that's been requested. But we have to vote on that. If you'd like to have a seat, sir, that would be helpful. So we have a motion. We had a denial of the first motion for approval. We have a second motion on the table we have a second motion to table this application and a second on that. Mr. Skinner, will you please call a vote for that?
This is a vote to table this application. Dominique Epps,
Yes.
Richard Eslick,
Yes.
Dan Froman, Corey Carnegie,
Yes.
Melissa Venable.
Yes.
The motion has been approved to table.
So we'll table this application, looking for additional information to show some conformity for the house that's being proposed to what's adjacent to the home currently. Thank you so much for attending.
And I also would maybe want to recommend that he works with staff in order for the guidelines to be followed so that there's no additional information that's required.
Yeah, as
when it comes back.
as Mr. Skinner just mentioned, Mr. Young, if you could please work with staff on what the requested information is so that we can be sure that it's a complete application at that time. Thank you. We'll move on now to BZA 34-2022, an application from Mr. Johnson on behalf of Douglas W. and Mary Sue Johnson. Mr. Skinner, will you please read my apologies, will you please read the caption?
Before the Board of Zoning Appeals today is BZA 34-2022. The applicant, Scott Johnson, is requesting a variance to reduce the required yard setback adjacent to a street from 25 feet to 10 feet for the construction of a 6-foot tall privacy fence. The property is identified as tax map 34F*24 and is addressed as 1321 Mead Drive. Zoning classification, residential low density, RL. When you act upon this request, we'll be acting on a request to reduce the required yard setback from 25 feet to 10 feet for the construction of a 6-foot privacy fence. Should the board decide in favor of approving this request, the 8 findings as listed in your package must be articulated as part of the motion. We will now have the zoning recommendation by Assistant Zoning Administrator Melvion Knight.
Morning again. My name is Melvion Knight, and I'm the Assistant Zoning Administrator for the City of Suffolk. Before I get started, good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Secretary of the Board, guests, visitors, and staff. Today, I'll be presenting BZA 34-2022. The applicant, Scott Johnson, on the behalf of Douglas W. and Mary Sue Johnson, are requesting a variance request to reduce the required side yard setback adjacent to a street from 25 feet to 10 feet for the construction of a 6-foot privacy fence. The applicant, Scott Johnson, is requesting a variance from the Unified Development Ordinance, Article 4, Section 31-407, parentheses C, Table 407-1, Dimensional Standards, parentheses J, again, to reduce the required side yard setback adjacent to a street from 25 feet to 10 feet for construction of a privacy fence. The property is identified as tax map 35F*24, parcel number 252819-210, which is located at 1321 Mead Drive in Suffolk, Virginia. The property is a part of the Holynet voting borough underneath the zoning classification of RL, Residential Low Zoning District. This property was advertised in the Suffolk News Herald, and a notice was mailed to adjacent property owners in accordance with Section 15.2-2204 of the Code of Virginia. A public notice sign was posted on the property pursuant to the request of the zoning administrator. The applicant, Scott Johnson, resides at 1321 Mead Drive, identified as Lot 24 within the Lake Mead subdivision, Section 1, which was platted on June 14, 1974. The applicant submitted a request to the Division of Community Development to install an in-ground pool on a portion of the property adjacent to Fox Run Place. According to the building code requirements identified as the Virginia Uniform State Building Code, it requires a pool permit to accompany a building permit for a fence which conforms to our pool regulations. The intent of the proposed 6-foot fence would act as a barrier along the property boundary which is adjacent to the city's right-of-way. According to Section 31-701, parentheses B, parentheses 10, it states that a fence or wall more than 6 feet in height may be located in any required side yard or rear yard other than a required yard adjacent to a street. Except the following above, where no fence or wall which creates a solid screen may exceed 2 1/2 feet in height in any required yard adjacent to a street, except that that fence may have a uniform opening of 50% or more, may be erected at a max height of 4 feet in such required yards. The installation of a 6-foot fence along this area adjacent to the street would not comply with that regulation unless it is established at the 25-foot setback as expressed on the survey, which is shown here. The staff's findings for this application shows that the application lacks support for the hardship, and that the 6-foot fence could be established at the 25-foot setback, which would be compliant with the code. And also, if the applicant were to establish the fence at the desired location, a 4-foot fence, 50% open, along Fox Run Place would comply with section 701, parentheses B, parentheses 10 of the Unified Development Ordinance. Therefore, staff recommends denial of this application at this time. I'm available for any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Melvian, I do have a question for you before you sit down. It looks to me that 10 feet off of the right-of-way, there's a utility easement,
Yes, ma'am.
so a fence couldn't sit on that utility easement.
Well, if he's requesting to establish the fence at the 10-foot setback, it would comply with that standard because it would be outside of that 10-foot easement, which was dedicated to the utility. So if he were to establish that 4-foot fence, if he were to establish the 4-foot fence, 50% open at the 10-foot setback, that would be compliant and outside of the dedicated area to a utility. If he were to establish it at the 25-foot setback, which is the front yard setback for that corner lot, it's a double front, then that 6-foot fence, 100% privacy, that would also be permissible underneath the ordinance. But what he's requesting would not.
Right, yeah, I was concerned about that utility easement because it looks like you would fall right on top of the easement line.
Yes, ma'am. They also have their own regulations for persons who would like to encroach into that area. They would have to follow their guidelines and then provide the city a written record that they've corresponded and allowed for that encroachment to happen.
Questions for Ms. Knight while she's at the podium? Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
We will now open our public hearing. We will have 30 minutes in length, 10 minutes for proponents, 15 minutes for opposition, and 5 minutes for rebuttal. Is there anyone to speak in favor of this application? Please come to the podium.
Hello there. I
Hi,
am
if you
Scott
could state-
Johnson,
Thank you. And your address?
1321 Mead Drive. And the reason we were asking for this is we do want to have a privacy fence in the backyard, and we do have to put a fence up. We just recently put in an in-ground pool, and because of the location of our well lines and septic lines, we had to put it very close along the edge of the house. And on the back side of our lot, like if you see where the word filter is, kind of in the center, there's a heavy gradient and we have to build a retaining wall. So the fence isn't going to be able to accompany a lot of that area. So we're going to lose some space there. So what we were trying to do was gain space on the front side of the house facing Fox Run, so we would have a little bit of room around the pool to walk and to have a little patio area and to let the kids and dogs run and play.
Do you have anything additional you'd like to add?
No, that's really about it. It's we just wanted to have a little more room than what the rules gave us.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone to speak in opposition? Seeing none, sir, Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to add? Okay, thank you, sir. That'll close this public hearing. Do we have questions, comments, or a motion? I would note that it looks like from the edge of the pool to the right-of-way, we have 47 feet, is that correct? You have, from the diagram that you'd given us, it looks like there's 47 feet from the edge of the pool to the property line. So you have, if you subtract the 25 feet, you have 22 feet from the edge of the pool to where the fence is supposed to be located. So you have, that's area for lounge chairs or patio or whatever that would sit around the pool. So currently, you would have 22 feet per the regulations, and you're asking for 37 feet essentially. And it looks to me that when you drive down that roadway, you would see that fence would be in front of other people's, in front of the front plane of other people's homes that are along what's labeled as Future Street, but I think it's Fox. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion in regard to the application or discussion of the motion? Do we have a motion?
I move for denial. I think if he were to stick with the regulations in place, that it would be adequate.
Second.
We have a motion for denial on the table. A conversation of the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Skinner, will you please take a vote?
This is a motion for denial. Dominique Epps,
Yes.
Richard Eslick,
Yes.
Dan Froman, Corey Carnegie,
Yes.
Melissa Venable.
Yes.
The motion is denied.
All right, sir, we thank you so much for coming this afternoon. Do we have any other items for today's agenda? No. And do we have a meeting next month? Wonderful, thank you so much. We will be hearing from you, and that concludes our agenda.